Do you know a guy who worked his butt off in high school to get into a great college? And after college, he landed a sweet job at a startup, made lots of money, got married, got the great car, the dream car. What if I was to tell you that every night he drives home feeling empty inside? Sounds unlikely, if not impossible, but it's true. It's something I see quite often. I'm a psychologist, and I have the privilege of working with men like this, great men who've sacrificed, listened to logic, done all the right things, and yet they've been trained to ignore something so basic that their victories seem hollow. What could it be? Here's what I've discovered. It's their emotions. Men's emotions are happening every day, all day, whether they like them or acknowledge them. And yet, how many of us know the emotionally avoidant guy? It's as if he goes through life with black electrical tape on his emotional dashboard, refusing to look underneath. To be fair, this isn't all of us, but it's a lot of us. And it can be a really painful ride. I mean, look at these guys, they're suffering. It can be a lot like this experience without necessarily the dance that accompanies those stick figures, what they're going through, but holding on to emotions and not dealing with them can cause cognitive and physical impairment. And yet, it seems that the thing that would give men most relief is the thing they want to avoid the most. I found a really fascinating study that corroborates this. I'd like to describe it to you. Subjects were given two options. They could either sit with themselves quietly with just their thoughts, or they could self-administer electrical shocks. What do you think the majority of the male subjects chose? That's right, they chose the shocks. And why? They chose them to distract themselves from those internal processes. This may sound really bizarre, but in my experience, it kind of makes sense to me. Dealing with our thoughts and feelings is really frightening to the uninitiated. And yet, men miss out on such important data that would make them smarter by not attending to their emotions. Neuroscientists have found that when human brains, are damaged in the emotion centers, those brains can't make decisions at all. We miss out on virtually half of our intelligence by not attending to those emotions. And yet men who avoid their emotions go through life almost as if they're half-baked lives. They live in black and white when they could be living in full color. And I'd like to let you in on a secret. Research shows that young boys are actually more emotionally expressive than their female peers. Can you imagine? Boys more emotionally expressive than girls. It's kind of a bombshell, right? And although men have emotions coursing through them all day, they've become estranged. They've become very good at hiding their emotions and hiding from their emotions. How did this happen? Well, in all likelihood, adults, authorities, well-intentioned, who were training boys to be men in this world, told them the rules, told them not to feel, either directly or indirectly, and the boys, they complied. And over time, boys learn various coping strategies to avoid those feelings. I'm going to describe one that's really popular. It's called compartmentalizing. Most of you probably know what this is, but it's when you file a feeling away to get through the day. And when you enter the professional world, it's just something you kind of got to do. Let's say you're on your way to work, you've got a huge presentation to give, but you get into a fight with your significant other. So you file the fight away. It's a good and necessary coping strategy, short-term coping strategy, but it's intended to be just that, a short-term coping strategy. Nobody really thrives when they're just coping and surviving. In fact, if this becomes the go-to and men stop feeling their feelings and just compartmentalize, they have difficulty knowing they're feeling anything at all. And come on, who are we kidding? Compartmentalizing long-term doesn't really work. When you file away a feeling into your memory, it takes up a lot of memory, and it's just waiting to bleed in. It's like loading a house with lots of boxes. And over time, the house becomes overwhelmed by the boxes, and there's no room for anything else. Compartmentalizing, it's as if it loads every square inch of our brain. I'd like to describe another popular experience for the emotionally avoidant guy. It's called the consent and resent trap. You may have seen it in action. I'm going to describe it. It's when somebody asks you to do something you super don't want to do, but you want to be nice, so you say sure. Shortly thereafter, you are really angry at the person who asked you to do whatever it was, and super pissed at yourself for saying yes. The poison of the sting from consent and resent can last anywhere from 5 seconds to 5 years to a lifetime. And by not attending to our emotions, we literally become sick and weakened. We somaticize, which is a fancy way of saying that the emotion gets converted into a physical symptom. The Diagnostic and Statistical Manual describes several somatic responses we have, and they can include anything from headaches to backaches, GI distress, and even, wait for it, erectile dysfunction. So what can men do to unlearn their socialized behavior? Fortunately, there's a fix. It begins with this. Emotions must be felt, ID'd, and processed. I like the acronym FIP, F-I-P, to remind us of this. And if we don't FIP, we run the risk of being in the passenger seat to our emotions rather than in the driver's seat. The F in FIP, the feeling part, is merely feeling and noticing I'm having a feeling. The IDing part is naming accurately and with precision what that feeling is. Lots of guys can name stressed as a feeling or annoyed, but these are kind of secondary cover-up feelings for more basic, fundamental, and vulnerable feelings like scared or sad. Guys are more than happy to bro up and say, dude, I'm stressed. But they'd have a lot of trouble saying, dude, I'm scared. Here, when I'm working with new clients, I have them try on emotions as if they're trying on shoes. We see if it fits. While this may not sound like a big deal, it's huge. Naming is enormous. A brilliant psychiatrist I knew, Dr. Hugh Huber, paraphrased a quote from Confucius that says, "True today as it was then. All wisdom comes from the accuracy in naming things." This quote certainly applies to emotions. In the early 20th century, super inventor Charles Kettering further validated this idea by saying, "A problem well stated is a problem half solved." I love these quotes because they speak to the fact that naming alone provides relief. It's like scratching a hard-to-reach itch or hitting a baseball in the sweet spot of the bat. It's just gorgeous. And when we accurately name a feeling, we can use our logic, the smart part of our brain, to decide what would be the best use of this emotion. Do you need to write about it? Do you need to go to the gym and work it out? Do you need to talk to a friend? Do you need to talk to a therapist? Do you need to have a difficult conversation with someone? I experienced the power of FIP just a couple of weeks ago when I was cleaning my 7-year-old son's goldfish tank. My son, Bren, adores his goldfish. He's got 3. He's got Tom, Jake, and Ari, and Ari's the tiny one, super cute, and before Ari came into the house, I didn't realize that goldfish had personality. This has kind of complicated my love of sushi. But I'm in the kitchen, I'm cleaning the tank, the fish are in a separate container, and when I went to put the fish back into the tank, I noticed little Ari was on his side. He was dying. I felt a concoction of chemicals coursing through my veins, a kind of pain I couldn't believe over a fish. But this wasn't just any fish. This was my beloved Bren's fish. I heard myself scream. Bren came running into the kitchen and said, "What?" And I said, "Ari is dying." Everything in my parental body said, "I've got to fix this." But this was beyond me. While Ari was in the tank, we realized he was dead. And this would be Bren's first experience with death. Bren screamed and cried, pure tears of sadness, and I just held him close while he was in it. There was a part of me that thought, I need to fix it or do something, but the smarter part of me realized he needed to go through his own process of feeling his feelings without me barging in. I'm happy to say Bren went through it bravely, and he's doing great. But if my wife and I had attended to Bren's feelings in another way and said something like, "Come on, boys, don't cry," or "Suck it up, it was just a fish," Bren would have gotten the message that feelings are not okay to feel. He might have covered up the grief, like lots of boys do, with a feeling of anger and punched his brother. Or he could have acted out in some other way. He could have self-medicated with food and television, and we know what that becomes later in life, self-medicating with alcohol and substances, or creating a mess far greater than attending to the feeling could have ever been. So remember this, attending to our feelings requires courage and practice, and there's a lot in it for us. Doing this can actually increase our intelligence and our strength. And who doesn't want to become smarter and stronger? I've developed a 7-step roadmap to tell us where we are in relationship with our feelings. This applies to all of us. This isn't just for men. We're all on a journey with our feelings. Come along and see where you are on this 7-step roadmap. Stage 1 I refer to as estranged. This is where feelings can be really frightening and foreign. The goal here is just to reacquaint people with the ability to feel a feeling. They certainly can't name the feeling, and the inability to name a feeling actually has a clinical term associated with it. It's called alexithymia. You can bust it out at a party if you want to sound really smart. I'll repeat it for your use, alexithymia. I love that word. Stage 2 is called naming. This is where we increase the dictionary of emotions and attain precision around those feelings. Stage 3 I call multiplicity. In my clinical experience, emotions kind of are social things. They tend to hang out in pairs or trios. Oftentimes we're experiencing multiple feelings, and it's important to be able to name all of them. And I help people do this almost as if they're looking at a pie chart percentage-wise. Want to see mine right now? Right now, I'm 60% excited, 30% terrified, and 10% curious. This is what we can do with the multiplicity. Stage 4 I call real time. This is where we've gotten good at naming feelings, naming the multiplicity of feelings, and they're getting pretty pro. They're able to do it quickly and efficiently. They're able to do it in real time, both in my office and out in the real world. Stage 5 I call discretion. Some feelings do need to be shared with another person. If that's the case, it's important to decide, does it need to be shared? If so, how much of this needs to be shared, and where and when would be optimal? Stage 6 I call the truth. Holding an unpopular feeling can be terrifying. And yet, to be in a relationship, sometimes you have to share it for the relationship to survive and thrive. We are trained to be team players, which is generally a really good thing, but the solo sport of being in our truth is important as well. We can't be genuine without it. And stage 7, which is the final stage and the highest level, it's the ability to do all the aforementioned 6 steps, as well as articulate in kind, clean ways that in all likelihood will create better connections in your relationship. We don't have to be like this in black and white. Yes, it's hard. Yes, it takes practice. And yes, it takes courage. But once you experience life in full color, you'll never go back. Thank you.